Oh, happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to my show where it really is okay to not be okay. I'm Rae Bonney, a qualified counsellor, workplace mental health specialist, not to mention a very dedicated and oftentimes enthusiastically disruptive men's issues advocate. Not every girl's dream job, but hey, someone's got to do it, right? As always, every week I'm unwrapping one of the greatest gifts going around, and that is people. Layer by layer, we explore the thoughts, experiences, achievements and challenges of ordinary people bound to inspire the best you, and at the same time acknowledging that it really is okay to not be okay, so turn up your dial. It's the last day of April today, and hasn't the weather started to get a bit of a bite, as in frost, of course. But anyway, last week we spoke with Amelia Stubbs, and she's an independent Australian plus-size model, blogger and social media influencer, inspiring a call to action around positive body image and diversity. During the show, we talked about how these issues actually more often than we recognise also affect men. But the image of oneself can be translated in many different ways in changing environments. For example, fame and fortune is something many aspire to and spend enormous amounts of energy in creating or recreating the model of celebrity and status. I read somewhere recently about David Bowie. Now, you don't get much more fame and respect than this timeless icon. He confessed that while filling auditoriums with impassioned fans in the early 70s, he said, "I had enormous self-image problems and very low self-esteem, which I hid behind obsessive writing and performing. I was driven to get through life very quickly," and Bowie told a reporter, "I really felt so utterly inadequate. I thought the work, songwriting, recording, performing, was the only thing of value that I had." So today I have in my studio a man who probably doesn't suffer from that amount of self-esteem issue, but he's from a band who look to be hurtling in the same direction as Bowie, down the rock-studded path of their impassioned craft. He is a great friend of my show, where it really is okay to not be okay. Glenn Patrick is a singer, songwriter and full-on frontman of Melbourne-based band The Collegians. They're an indie electronic rock band, and other members include James and Vince Lee from hit 80s band Pseudo Echo, but we don't like to mention that. Not to mention other brother Jerry, all being inspired to produce great music because of the connection it makes with other people, no matter where you are or what you're into. So here, in all of his not leathered and lathered glory, is Glenn Patrick.
Hey. You know what? I'm actually so disappointed that I didn't wear my leather jacket today. You've turned up, all prepared.
I did. I had to go through like my son's wardrobe and find a bit of leather. For
That's your son's.
It is actually. I bought this from, well, it is mine now, but I bought this from a shop in Flinders Street, which is a vintage reproduction. Well, not reproduction. They're a true vintage shop, but they reproduce leather jackets made out of old leather jackets and make them into new ones. So you can see it's got all different panels which have belonged to different jackets from the 60s and 70s.
That's great. I actually love the fact that you and your son share clothes.
Well, he's now 6'3", I think, and I bought this for him when he was about 13, so he doesn't fit into it.
I can see by the arms, they might be a little bit too short for him now.
They are, but if you're listening, George, hello. How are you?
George. Hey, thanks for having me.
Welcome
really appreciate
back.
it. Thank you so much.
This is number 3.
Third time lucky, yeah.
Yes.
Third time's a charm.
That's right. And I think I'm a little bit more slick in my presentation, but I did get a bit lost there in the whole description of my leather jacket and where it came from.
I love it. It's almost like chaotic poetry that you sort of bring to the table, even with things like jackets. I love it.
Well, being a bit poetic and a bit creative, you probably heard that piece that I found about David Bowie. And, you know, you look at David Bowie and apparently, you know, he's probably one of the most confident stage walkers that you would ever see.
Yeah.
And then you're reading that bit about him. But I did draw a bit of a thin bow to this because I read somewhere recently that, in fact, your latest single, Killer, takes its musical cues from a creative space that musicians like Linkin Park, NIN, Bjork and Bowie have worked in. Is that correct?
Well, that was actually a publication that was written about us, so that was someone else's take on the style of the song. So I love the fact that there's some acts in there that we haven't sort of been, what's the word? We haven't actually,
Contributed.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's we usually know Linkin Park because that was very similar to Vaccine and the first single that we had. But
yes.
It's really good where you start to hear other bands' influences that other people can actually hear and we can't. So it's great because I used to listen to Nine Inch Nails and this song, The Killer, I wrote probably about sort of 3 or 4 years ago when I first joined the band. There's a thing called production writing, and then there's a thing called, your old school writing where you're behind a guitar and writing pen and paper. And this is like one of the first tracks that I actually recorded as a production writer behind a mixing desk at home and doing it bit by bit like that. And
well, how interesting, because I've been on the trajectory with you, first having you in here with I think we were one of the first radio stations to play Vaccine.
Yes.
And then since then you've had your next single, which was
Black Mass, I believe.
Black Mass, yes, and that was also almost debuted here. But then to say that you actually wrote Killer way before that, and now it's the third one to be released.
Yeah, well, we actually started about 3 or 4 years before we started releasing tracks. So we just really wanted to get a good, solid number of songs ready or produced, ready to go before we start, showing it to the world, because we want to have all our bases covered to go out into this lonely, world filled with silent sound of other people's music, and it's a big world out there, and there's so many more musicians and acts. Every person's a muso these days.
Although, Glenn, you never know who's listening, do you?
You don't.
And
no.
you're talking about influence before, and you're influenced by bands, and then you're listening to the way that the industry is talking about you and seeing influence in your music, and you're going, oh, never have thought of that. And I had an email last night, a message all the way from Utah talking about you guys. And you'll know Caroline Lepardi is not only a big fan of yours, but also a promoter from the other side of the world of the Collegians.
Yeah, she's done great things over there. She's such a lovely lass over in Utah. It's amazing that you can actually have music from one end of the world go all the way to the other side of the world.
Yes.
And this is before Vaccine even got released, and she touched base with us mid last year.
Yeah.
And she knew of the other guys as well, so it kind of just transcended to Collegians and went from there. So she's been great. So
doing some great work. Now that's Northwest American Music and North American Music Promotion are the organisations that she represents. And when I was having a bit of a chat with her last night, she also said that she listens to all of my shows.
Yeah, she loves you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And then she told me also that she's a psych nurse on the side whilst she's promoting you guys all over the place. In the daytime she goes and looks after psychiatric patients, and I'm very curious about that, so I'm going to have her on the show later in the year.
Ooh, she's going to love that.
Yeah, well, she's not going to get on a plane. We have to use Skype because we do rely on technology here. But again, I just love that, the world isn't such a big place.
You know what, though? You're going to have to make it a 3-hour show because she can talk.
Yes. Well, I'm a very good producer, Glenn, which I'm going to demonstrate as we move very quickly through this show. Anyway, we have digressed. But we did last meet back in November 2000. Oh, no, it was earlier than 2017 when we were talking about Black Mass, which we talked about Vaccine as well. How are they both going?
Really well.
Honestly, like you're not going to just go, they're really well. Or have they faded back into the background a bit?
Oh, well, Black Mass kind of has. A Vaccine's still running really strong, which is good. That was the first one that we released, and we kind of figured that one was going to be a bit more of a commercial song that was going to stand a bit more at the test of time comparatively to Black Mass. And Black Mass was more of a track scouted out towards the alternative crowd, and we wanted to make it more of an alternative sort of vibe, just to get the take on modern day music and how it works, because your big wigs, your Triple Js, and a lot of the alternative radio stations, sometimes they're a lot harder to even get in compared to the commercial radio scene.
Yes.
And it's just a really good way of finding out what makes them tick and what they like. And not that we're writing songs for radio. We'll never do that. We just wanted to sort of do our alternative take on a track and see what they thought.
Yeah. But in terms of those relationships, there's quite a difference between commercial radio here, community radio, and of course alternative radio.
Yeah.
Is it about the relationship, Glenn, or is it truly about their take on the music and, adopting music that suits their programming?
Music's always been about the one main thing personally for me. I can't speak for the boys. But
no, I'm talking about how the radio stations select.
Oh, yeah, no, the radio stations select it. I think it's based on timing. It's based on their preference. A lot of alternative radio have their own sound, if you know what I mean. You've Triple J has either got, metal in the evenings or this sort of wispy, typical Triple J, overemphasized Australian female vocal sound.
Oh, there he goes. That's a bit of a dig, yeah.
Well, you know what? I think...
Your voice went a bit girly then as well.
You know what I think at the end of the day? I'm just trying to get that alternative female wispy voice. That's probably what it is. I don't think it's a dig. I think more... I'm basing it purely on what they're playing.
Yes.
And I'm not going to diss that in any way. That's their choice. It's their radio station. They can do what they want. There's plenty of other opportunities out there. It's a big world. And, if they enjoy one of our songs, that's great. If they don't, that's fair enough as well. We're not going to, crumble to the ground because someone doesn't like our songs. It's always subjective. So that's the great thing about music.
Well, that's interesting because, as a band, I guess, are you all writers or are you predominantly? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're all writing stuff. And feedback, human beings, the human condition does not like rejection. That's a fact.
Yeah.
None of us like rejection, especially in relationships. But when it comes to our work, we don't like it either, and especially when it comes from the heart. So how does it feel? Because people do give feedback, and, we call them keyboard warriors. They're, we have this social media now where it's very easy to hide behind your opinions. Do you get feedback that sometimes hurts you?
Your reviewers, what have you done lately? Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah. They're wrong, yeah.
When I first started, when I was a kid, I was always very hesitant to throw out my own tunes because of that. And you'll find the majority of musicians, especially starting out, would do that. But you get pummeled to the ground enough times.
Yeah.
It can either do one of two things. It can either completely ruin the whole industry for you, or it can, ice over your heart a little bit. And that's not saying that, you're going to be an emotionless soul going into such an art form that's purely based around emotion. It is pretty much just a really good guide in telling you that you can do it one opinion and it'll still be the wrong opinion with somebody else. And if you can learn that earlier on, and once again, the word subjective, that's the one word that's actually got me through the industry, because I haven't been as successful as the boys in my band have over the years.
You haven't?
No, I'm in my mid-30s, and this is the first time where a band that I'm in is actually starting to sort of get a bit of momentum.
Yeah.
And we're still a long way off. And not saying that judging by, how much notoriety we get determines on how successful you're going to be.
Yep.
It's your own personal feeling and your own personal vibe about how you are going to present yourself to the world.
Yeah.
And I seriously do not think that criticism is a bad thing. Not anymore.
The way that it's delivered, though, can sometimes, be a make or break, depending on where you are at that moment and receiving the information too. People can be bloody nasty.
Oh, the harsher the better.
Yeah?
Yeah, personally for me.
Yes.
Because I actually love to hear it, because it'll either, maybe we are doing something that the majority of people aren't really too keen on.
Yeah, but that would be objective, probably constructive feedback rather than just out and out, I hate you because you're crap.
Well, we haven't really had much of that yet, but at the same time, I think saying you're crap, stop.
Yes.
you just want to do it more because you want to teach them a lesson.
Yeah, well, that's a very good attitude. And when we come back, we're not going to a break yet, but in the second half of the show, I really want to dig down into that to, really get our listeners in touch with what it might feel like to be you every day, you and the band every day, because what we see is, these great, and that's what I've read, is great reviews, and, you've reached this next plateau of peak of your career or band career, which is really exciting watching the progress. And even the three different songs, I was listening to Killer and also looking at some of the feedback from the industry, and it's got a lot more and a lot bigger and a lot more sophisticated, I think, from the beginnings as well. Is that so?
I think slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah. With
the tracks that we release single by single, we're not doing it your typical textbook way where, you get out your gig and you release an album all at once when nobody knows you. We really want to really build that level up slowly but surely. And, one more single, then we're going to start to sort of gig that way. So then, people want to turn up to the gigs because they know the songs already. We're just trying it a little bit differently because, we've been down this path a few times now. So let's mix it up a bit. Why not? Not
just one song and a bunch of covers.
No, that's right.
Now, I might be spoiling a bit of an on-air surprise here. I actually listened really carefully to the song, Killer. In fact, listeners, I purchased it off iTunes. That's what you do. You don't listen to it on YouTube. You purchase it and you support our Australian artists because they really get out there and they work really, really hard and often have one or two other jobs at the same time. So spend your, I think it was $2.95 or $3 or something I spent last night on Killer. But I was listening to the lyrics, Glenn, and a few of them really jumped out at me. Here goes. She's a killer, such a busy bee. Does it come at a price not to take your advice? I'm a counsellor.
Yep. Delving into the deep here, I can see.
She's one educated nymphomaniac that I need. Is this written about me?
Well, you know what? You brought in the letters today, so it's hard to deny, really, isn't it?
You just laughed out loud. Like, I read it and I thought, he's taken the inspiration from Rae Bonney.
Yeah, that's what it is. Rae Bonney. I just can't do without you. It's the pain that you inflict on me that I just love so much.
There are some really interesting lyrics.
Yeah.
And I think any left-wing feminist or third-wave feminist that was listening to those lyrics might be a little bit put out.
Well, I don't really... I'm a storyteller. The other boys are storytellers.
Was this real life experience?
No, it wasn't.
Because if it was, I'm surprised you're still alive.
No, it wasn't a real life experience. It was just something where I've known a lot of people to get into a certain position where, regardless if it's a female or a male, you can take away whatever you want from the song. There's always going to be a person in a position of need. Even if it's a painful need. People always want pain regardless of whether or not they realise it or not. Pain is what makes us human. Pain is what sort of really, it brings to the table a realisation of being human. And I think that's what we all sort of strive to achieve is one's self-worth.
Yes. And I think, as a society, we medicate against that now. We medicate against sadness and pain and inconvenience and all those things that really
sucks, doesn't it?
Dilute, as you said, the reason for being and the purpose for being, because even though pain is uncomfortable and sadness and grief is very uncomfortable, it's an intrinsic part of who we are. And if society says, no, be happy, you can't be sad or you can't be in pain, then we're missing a whole piece.
How are you going to learn? We are who we are based on our past experiences. It's really important to really, I don't know how you say it. If you have a bad experience, you touch something hot, you're not going to touch it again. Or
you might
touch it again. And that's
There's
pretty much what the song's about. You know what I mean?
Called, yeah.
The song's more about having that addiction towards the pain.
Yes.
So but at least you're aware of it, and I think being aware is the most important part of it. Don't sort of hide it and medicate over it.
Yeah.
It's a learning process. It's a learning experience.
What one could do is purchase the song Killer, and that is your answer to what Glenn is trying to describe right now.
For a limited time only, because apparently iTunes is going to the gods very soon.
No, really?
Yep, it's going to be a big hit for independent artists.
What do you mean? What happens to all the music I've purchased? Where does that go?
Well, you'll still keep that.
Yes.
But you know how there's Apple Music now, which is Spotify's sort of competition.
Right. I didn't know this, but...
Okay, so Apple Music is pretty much Apple's version of Spotify.
Yeah.
So Apple, CEO of Apple about a month ago, did a press conference saying that they're going to be phasing out iTunes shortly, which means no more buying songs from iTunes anymore. It's just going to be streaming, similar to Spotify. So it's a whole new world. So now us as independent artists have to find a better way of how we use iTunes is we get as many downloads as possible. We do pre-sales at the start, so we have this big peak of sales when it gets released, and that gives the artist a chance of getting charting. And then that charting spot in the first couple of weeks of release gives you leverage to get onto bigger stations like commercial stations, and you kind of strategically place those parts in getting slowly up the ladder. Yeah. And that's how we as independent artists do it. That's how commercial artists do it as well. Like big labels do that, but they do it in bigger volumes. But they also do it with physical sales. So they'll spend $10,000 on giving JB Hi-Fi a whole bunch of singles, and then just on order as long as they can send it back again.
On AppRo.
Yeah, that's it. It's how many singles that are ordered, not how many singles are sold. So you'll see a lot of artists jump up to number one, and then the next week they're almost out of the charts again. Yeah. That's how it's done, unfortunately. But independent artists don't have that sort of financial backing, so they use iTunes to do that one peak. And
well, so if I'm listening to you and hearing you correctly, that means Apple Music and Spotify and all those guys, consumers will be at the mercy of, if we don't purchase the registration, then we just get whatever is churned out for free, which may or may not include your music.
Yep.
Or we purchase a subscription and then we can actually choose to listen.
Yeah, that's it. And the artist gets sales from each stream, but it's not one sale. I think you need like 30 streams to get one sale or something. So it's quite significant.
That's really shit, Apple. Pick up your act. Like, haven't you got enough money already through your phone charges and your accessories and all those things?
I've only just got a new phone. It's not new. It's an iPhone 8, so it's a few behind. But you need an extension for your headphones and
a jack and
extra $20.
Yeah.
Not made of money.
If they weren't such a good product, I'd change.
They're amazing. I don't know. It's like a drug.
Now, speaking of amazing, we are going to go to a break because I want to debut Killer on my show. But it's not just you that makes the Collegians. We do have three brothers as well. Yep. Jerry, James and Vince. What naming decisions do you reckon their parents were making? You got a Jerry and a James, and it sounds like Vince was maybe the product of the the fruit and veggie man down the road. Is that right?
He was the middle one, so probably not.
Oh, right.
Yeah. It's actually funny because I hear that back now that you actually say it. It sounds like they were eating rice bubbles at the time when they're looking at Snap, Crackle and Pop.
That's right. Not casting any aspersions on Mr. and Mrs. Lee, of course, because they're probably listening in. Now, here is the third instalment of the Collegians story. They call it an electronic-soaked sucker punch. What do you think of that? Do you think that's an apt description?
I love that. There was another one as well that was Collegians have completed the Dark Trinity. Oh. Which was quite...
Because I thought Black Mass was a bit dark.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, it was dark.
But this is a bit more poppy. And I really like the cover as well.
Oh, thank you very much.
Because I do like a splash of colour.
Yeah, it's quite
nice.
You first look at it, it's almost like a fish, but it ends up being a bird with a beak. So it's...
Oh, really? So it's one of those things that you can... it's like find Where's Wally or something like that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you want to give it a bit of an intro?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our third instalment. The Dark Trinity itself It's Killer from the band Collegians.
Do yourself a favour. Ice Tunes. Yeah, they should call it Ice Tunes because they're off their head. iTunes, buy it. Where else can they buy Killer, Glenn? The people.
Oh, all the good music.
Brashes.
Brashes. That's a word I haven't heard for a while. It's all just online at the moment. There's no sort of physical sales, but yeah, Amazon, eMusic, Nokia. It's on Spotify.
Yep.
Streaming. So yeah, it's pretty much anywhere it's streaming and that you can go to. iHeartRadio, Deezer. Taking over your airwaves.
Oh, no, he's the flavoursome frontman of the Collegians. They're an indie electronic rock band who, according to industry critics, are poised to take the world by storm.
A poison to take over the world by storm.
Well, I did refer to you as a flavoursome frontman because when I was writing the show last night, I thought, what starts with F? And that was the first word that came into my mind. I thought, can't be bothered finding anything appropriate.
That's fine.
I'm sure you taste good, though. Not like poison.
Horrible. Horribly.
Now, back to your promoters, and we're talking about this whole global phenomenon of music and, you know, how we're consuming music these days. It's the same because we enjoy music, and music is one of those great pieces of entertainment that engage us, inspire us, you know, evoke emotion and, you know, all that kind of stuff that we were talking about before. However, the production and the commercial side of music is very, very different. But I know you, because I watch you on Facebook because we're friends. You've been travelling all over Australia. You've been in Adelaide. I think you're heading out to the West soon, promoting the songs, not yet the album. Where do you find time, money and space to do that?
I think it's more about determination more than anything. I love writing music. I love playing music.
No, you just smiled like really broadly.
No, well, I do. It excites me just thinking about it. I don't play music enough at the moment. So what I do to sort of compensate with that, I've never gotten into the industry side of music until with this band. I'd always get to a certain point with the band and then the band would dissipate because of lack of knowledge for the industry. Or politics, yeah. I mean, it's you know, it's almost like being in a marriage with three other people. I mean,
I was going to say like in a movie because the bands always break up, don't they?
They make the best movies.
Yeah,
definitely.
They do.
And I never really thought about digging my teeth into the industry. And now not only am I excited about singing and performing and writing, also the industry side of things, it really excites me. This day and age, you know, 30 years ago it might be a little bit different, but now because the innovation of the industry, you know, even though we're talking about the iTunes thing before, that's not really necessarily a good thing for independent artists, but that doesn't mean that there's not good things happening.
Yes, and you know, you'll always find a new way, and I think with change in the world, we're always reacting like in conflating all the information, going, oh my God, this is the worst thing, it's never going to happen. Then we find a way around it.
Yeah, it's like a loophole.
Yes, which creates more jobs for people probably, or more opportunities. We just didn't see it because we were overreacting to the change to begin with.
That's it. And amalgamating creation with politics can be quite a difficult
navigation.
Yeah, navigation. But I think it's a lot of fun. At the start, it's very daunting. You don't know anyone that's in the sort of industry of it all. What I did before I released Vaccine, I thought I've got to get back out into the music world again. I was too locked up in my own world with the band, just writing in the studio for years. And I don't talk to anyone in the music industry anymore. Let's just start and make a call to all my old friends who are in bands to see what they're doing. And literally 3 weeks later, I'm knee deep in contacts, and then a couple of months later, I'm waist deep. And now it's sort of taken over. And the industry side of things I love, because there's always going to be someone out there, most likely a 14 or 15-year-old person, that's going to completely change the way the industry works. Spotify was created by a young kid. You know, now look at it.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Facebook. I mean... It's all from these young entrepreneurs with... Yes. They may not be artists, but
they're innovators.
They're innovators, and they change the game.
Yeah.
And even though the Spotify thing was this big independent, now it is on the stock market. but now it's actually helped the majors. The majors have always
Is
struggled.
that original innovator, that kid, is he still part of the...
Not too sure. I know there's sort of co-owners in it now, you know,
Yeah.
Jared Leto from 30 Seconds to Mars, Justin Bieber. There's a lot of the big sort of profile artists that are a part of it.
Yes. But what you're saying, like, anything is possible.
Of course.
Quite often, you know, you hear from people of the younger generation, or even from, you know, other generations saying, if only I'd thought of that.
Yeah.
You know, now there's nothing else to, everything's been done now, so there's nothing more to invent or create. And you go, well, yeah, there probably is.
Everything's always been done.
Yes.
And then something new happens.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the industry. It's like putting a creative spark into the industry, which didn't really happen, you know, back in the 70s, because it was almost like a textbook way of doing things. You'd record, you'd gig, there'd be an A&R guy, right place, right time, or you knew them. They'd pick you up and it'd go from there. And A&R, there's hardly any such thing anymore.
Yeah, well, it was very, I guess, transactional and one-dimensional as well, how you produce music. You know, you'd write it, you'd create it, you'd record it and sell it.
Yeah.
And there was just that one kind of supply chain that, you know, was very, very straight,
Yeah.
I guess. But when we look out there, you know, to the Collegians, for example, you know, there's the Lee brothers, all legitimate, of course, and you. But you seem to be not only the front man, but also the, I guess, the voice of the Collegians out there too, because we don't see the other brothers doing a lot out there publicly.
We each have our own hats that we
Okay.
wear. And I think that's a really good thing to start off with.
You've got a very nice knitted grey one on today.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes.
It's 20-something degrees outside, and I'm still wearing a beanie.
It's good. Keep your brains warm.
Keeps the juices flowing, that's for sure. We each have our own hats. So I think, once again, it's a really important thing to have in a band, is to know where you're at, know what your place in the band is. Not just as a musician, you know, I play guitar, I'm a drummer, I'm a bass player. If you each have your own role to play, I think that plays a big part in forming a good relationship and longevity.
And sustaining it, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. A clarity of purpose.
Yeah.
It's really important, isn't it? And what, you know, managing each other's expectations. I think when you watch those band movies or you hear band stories, it's always because people didn't really understand what somebody else's expectations were. And once things sort of hit a bit, you know, bit of rough road, that's when it all kind of falls apart.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse than one person dragging the whole band. It takes the minimum of, you know, half the band to three-quarters of the band for it to sort of...
So you feel you got a pretty good balance at the Collegians?
Yeah, I think so. And knowing where each person is at really helps. So
Yes.
having that talk at the start, saying, okay, so you don't have enough time to do this, so we
Yeah.
just won't include you in a certain part. Or the good thing is, James has a beautiful studio called Refinery Recording in Williamstown. It's state-of-the-art. It's amazing. We've got that at the drop of a hat, which is great.
Wow.
So that's where we record everything. And so he's the producer. He's the ears. He's the Spectrum kid who's really anal about every particular...
When you say he's on the spectrum.
we call him Spectrum because, yeah, we believe he's on the spectrum because of just his... Yeah, I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
And
have you watched that show, Employable Me, on the ABC?
no, I've heard about it though.
Really, really good. You know, in terms of recognising the skills and attributes that come from people who are on the spectrum, you know, that really add value to organisations around what they bring, rather than seeing, you know, it as a disability, autism or Asperger's as a disability. It's a real ability in many different settings.
Yeah.
Like music that you've just described.
I find it funny how they say being on the spectrum is a disability in some ways, when to the contrary of that, it's almost like a sixth sense.
Yes.
It's a chaotic sense, but that's what makes it so important.
Yes. Being stupid is a disability. Being ignorant is a disability.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's more to just making music, isn't there? You've got to manage money, and also the album cover, you know, like we saw on Spinal Tap, how that went really wrong when they had Smell the Glove, and, you know, they weren't allowed to have that because it was a bit sexy.
Glad you brought that up.
It was sexist, I think. But they ended up with the Black Album. I love it. Still love that show.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different aspects to... It isn't just writing a song.
Yeah.
And you don't really realise how much there is until you release your first track. And you can't go half-assed on any of it. Each aspect is extremely important to have. That single cover, it's just a single cover, but it took maybe about 100 different covers for us to all agree on that one.
Yeah.
And, we're not going to get frustrated about someone not liking it. If one of us doesn't like it, we're not going to use it because we're all out to achieve and have the exact same goals. And if one of us isn't happy with something, then we change it. I mean, the single was originally going to be released at the end of March instead of Friday the 13th, which I think Friday the 13th was pure coincidence.
Yeah.
The song's called Killer. So it was actually better that we released it then. But the song just wasn't ready. I wasn't particularly happy with some certain aspects of it. So, we went back and we fixed it up.
Well, that's collaborating, isn't it?
Collaborating.
Calibrating. But I think, when we're talking to you about a band and a collaboration, and, there are probably some, things like managing expectations, which is really, really important. But then I think about solo artists and how lonely that must be, even though you've got management around you, perhaps. But even for some lesser known artists, I had Madison Daniel in recently, who is a friend of yours.
She's gorgeous.
She's amazing.
Great, yeah.
And Madison, for her to make things real, she goes out and busks. She goes out in the streets of Geelong until 3 o'clock in the morning in the rain, busking. And I asked her why, and she said, just want to keep things real. I want to be able to test out my music on people, And so when they're walking past and they're not stopping, I know there's probably something I need to change. And when they stop, I know I'm doing it right. So I really loved interviewing her. And that show, in fact, will be produced on my YouTube channel, I think, in the next week.
I cannot wait to hear it. The hippie mentality, I love it.
Now, we were also talking about other artists as well, and, the influence of the industry and also some of the hardships of the industry. And I guess one of the things I talk about a lot is, how people are feeling, and sometimes that reaches a point where somebody is not managing at all. And not to cast aspersions or anything, because we don't know this, but we saw the death of Dolores O'Riordan from the Cranberries earlier this year in January.
You've got a bit of a Dolores look about you.
Do I?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, because she's very cute. Well, she was.
Loved her to death.
Yeah. Well, was that a pun?
Well, there you go. I told you Killer was written about you.
Yeah. You said you loved her to death, but she's dead. But anyway,
good one.
Boom, boom.
Yeah, now I get it.
But seriously,
slow off the uptake. It's Monday.
But, she died really suddenly, and it was, the same day that she was having very positive conversations on the phone about doing some recording, and I think they were doing a collaboration with the Bad Wolves for Zombie. That's what I read anyway. And she left a really upbeat voicemail, and then she died the same day. And again, the autopsy's been done, but that her reason for death has not yet been released. But, it's really telling, isn't it, that sometimes people, even though they apparently have a great career, I mean, she was very well known, the Cranberries are, world-renowned. Why would somebody like that, all of a sudden die? It left you with a bit of a feeling, didn't it?
There's been so many artists that have died young over the past few years. Let's face it happens all the time. But I think it happens, there's a lot more publicity now. There's a lot more media hype about things. And Dolores was a massive hit to me. She was the one singer-songwriter band that I just adored growing up. It was one of my first albums that I got. She was just such an inspiration, just diverse, different compared to all the other bands I'd listened to. I was a 90s boy, so she fit really well. And being one of the only sort of female rock artists beside them, I loved Melissa Etheridge as well. She was great. And there was actually MTV Unplugged with the Cranberries, and right after that was Melissa Etheridge as well. And that was one of my favourite MTV shows with those two in it. Yeah.
So you were glued to that for a few hours.
I've recorded it and just watched it over and over again. She was, just such an amazing soul. But, like the majority of artists, there's underlying factors there that don't necessarily show in the public eye, and rightfully so.
But I think that's the perception, isn't it, of people? If you look great and you sound great, therefore you are great.
Yeah.
And, even though she did have quite a public history of mental health challenges, she still didn't make it. So, but she leaves an amazing legacy, and one that you and I talked about. And I did start a bit of a trend with Madison Daniel, which spilled into last week, and when I was interviewing Amelia Stubbs, who is a plus size model. And that's who she's known as.
I saw the video. She's gorgeous.
I know, but she's a singer as well. And so I did a bit of a stand-up start with her and said, hey, can you belt out a tune? And she did, and you saw it. It was Etta James, At Last. And it's had so many views on my Facebook, and it will go up on YouTube as well. But I thought, why the hell not? Glenn Patrick, get away from the Collegians, and let's do a little bit of a tribute to Dolores. And I know because you're a fan, you do this. So how about a bit of Zombie?
Bit of Zombie. Alrighty. This is a little bit different. I don't usually do many covers anymore, so this is my rendition.
Here we go.
Zombie.
Glenn Patrick.
Another head hangs lonely, child is slowly taking, and the violence causes silence. Who are we mistaken? May you see, it's not me, it's not my family. In your head they're still fighting with their tanks and their bombs and their guns and their drones. In your head, they're still dying. What's in your head? In your head, zombie, zombie, zombie. What's in your head? In your head, zombie, zombie, zombie. Another mother's breaking heart is taken over, and the violence causes silence. Who are we mistaken? May you see, it's not me, it's not my family. In your head, they're still fighting with their tanks and their bombs and their guns and their drones. In your head, they're still dying. What's in your head? In your head, zombie, zombie, zombie. What's in your head? In your head, zombie, zombie, zombie. Oh, 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 oh. Hey, oh, yeah. Yeah,
Whoa, Glenn Patrick. You're the boss, man. That was amazing. Dolores would have been proud. Great stuff.
Thank you very much.
How's your voice?
Yeah, not too bad.
That's that was great.
Thank you.
That's an original. We just made an original.
It's an original third cover. It's almost like the Black Walls version. So
yeah,
it is Black Walls, isn't it?
Yes.
Black Walls. Yeah.
Yes. Well, they
Great
didn't get to do that recording though because she didn't make it.
They did do the recording.
Did they?
Yeah.
They
you
did.
haven't heard it?
No.
Oh, you are in for a treat.
All right. Well, I will listen to that after the show. Still feeling a little bit emotional actually, watching you sing. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
Your mum would be really proud of you.
Good old mum.
Good old.
Old mumsy.
Is she listening in?
Mum and Dad are probably listening, or
Oh.
they're in some. Actually, no, I think they're in a waiting room somewhere. So
Oh, are they okay?
yeah, they're fine.
Yeah.
Just waiting.
Just
you know.
waiting
Is
for
anyone okay waiting?
a Greyhound bus to take them to on a trip or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
Because your surname actually isn't Patrick. That's your middle name, isn't it?
Yeah, hyphenated first name, kind of.
Which is because your surname's actually
Fogwheel. Yeah.
Fogwheel, which is. I can imagine why you don't pop that on the album cover.
Yeah, actually the boys were saying, why don't you just leave your last name because it's better than Patrick? And I've used Patrick my entire life, and I don't know why.
I think Glenn Patrick sounds a lot more rock and roll. You know, many people transpose my name to Bonnie Rae because I think it sounds a little Bonnie Raitt. So it sounds because I look like a rock star.
I love your name, yeah. I love your look, and so yeah, keep it going.
Thanks.
Keep it going, Bonnie Raitt.
Now, that was great feedback. I like feedback. Anyone that's listening in, and I know that there are a few people listening because I've received many, many emails already, but give me some feedback. You can contact me on my Presenting Rae Bonney on Facebook. Join my page. You can find me at my YouTube channel as well, Rae Bonney, not Bonnie Raitt. It's expertly produced by Scott Corman's Talk Hub in New South Wales. He does fabulous work. Check out his latest productions at Talk Hub or through my YouTube channel. If Glenn and I have spoken about anything today that has raised some uncomfortable issues, don't forget you can contact Lifeline on 131114. The suicide callback service is 1300 659 467, or emergency services is 000. So Glenn Patrick,
So Rae Bonney,
we bid farewell to yet another Rae Bonney and Glenn Patrick production.
I'm so going to miss you, Ray.
I know, but we keep in touch because we
I
see
know,
each other
still
on.
another sort of 3 or 4 months. We'll touch base again.
Yeah, but we send each other messages.
Yeah, I know.
Sometimes we bring each other up.
I love it here. I'm just going to stay here for a while.
So we'll leave it there now. Remember, it really is okay to be not okay. We've proven that today. But also extending a bit of kindness and care, Glenn, you know that as well as I do, could be saving a life. So take care, everyone, and we will see you next week. Say
Peace. Bye. Take it easy.
Bye. Well, that didn't work either, did it? So here we go again. We're going to say goodbye one more time. Bye.
Bye.